Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast, the number one source for news, analysis, and discussion on the Detroit Red Wings, the NHL, and all things hockey. Here are your hosts, Ryan Hanna, Brad Crisco, and Evan Lopsinger.
Is this happening because we actually struck an optimistic chord last episode, or is this happening because Evan's not here, and whenever Evan's on vacation, a pillar moment happens in the Red Wings season, and we have this big episode where we talk about something substantial? I mean, last season it was Patrick Kane, overtime winner in Chicago, all the hype, and that, put the Red Wings very well in a playoff spot. We actually got comfortable enough to predict a playoff berth for the Red Wings. This time feels like the inverse, but which one is it? Because it feels like we're being punished.
The timeline doesn't add up because Evan's gone for the optimistic episodes, and he was here for the last one, and he didn't try to rein us in, so we were still allowed to run free with it despite his presence. Feels like we're in one of the branches coming off the main timeline this year because it doesn't add up, but it's still got the same feel to it.
Look, man. We can just talk about the Detroit Lions. We can just do that all episode. That feels like what every Detroit fan is doing right now. I still can't get over, speaking of timelines, what timeline are we in where after last night's game, and even after the Anaheim game, I thought, wow, at least we have the Lions game on Sunday to look forward to. And it wasn't ironic. Like, I wasn't even being a sarcastic jerk. Like, that's a real thing. And it delivered. Bizarro world, man. In any case, this is going to be an interesting episode, but it feels like the episode that was coming for a while. Let's get into it. Evan is away on vacation right now. Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast, here to talk to you about all things Detroit Red Wings hockey, the world of the NHL, Steve Yzerman, Derek Lalonde, and lots more. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Hanna.
I'm Brad Crisco.
And again, no Evan. That lucky SOB.
To be fair, he did put in the group chat, hey, you guys deserve an easy episode for having to sit through those two games.
Yeah, and what did he suggest, a prospect profile? Oh, no, that was you.
That was me. I said he gets to pick which prospect we profile.
No, I know we're close, but I can't quite yet. And the good thing is we actually have a lot to talk about today. So on this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, we're going to be talking about Detroit's two games that have started off their West Coast road trip, the Anaheim game and the LA Kings game. We're going to be talking about probably the worst possible injury to happen to Detroit that isn't, one of Larkin or Seider. We'll talk about the conversation that's going around the Red Wings world right now. Is Derek Lalonde on the hot seat, and is it time for Steve Yzerman to make a change? And does that change have to be Derek Lalonde? We're going to be talking about other Red Wings news as well as NHL news, which there's plenty of. Some of it directly relevant to Detroit in terms of salary cap and things like that. But this is the Yzerman, Lalonde, what needs to change episode. Before all that, I want to let you know that the Winged Wheel Podcast is primarily supported by our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. If you want to support the show, you get access to benefits like our bonus overtime episodes and any other bonus content we create. We record those right after these main shows. We let loose, have fun, answer any questions that don't make it onto the main show. You get bloopers, you get snippets. It's a little unhinged, but it's a good time. You also get access to our Patreon exclusive Discord, and you're automatically entered into all of our giveaways. We give away 2 tickets to every Detroit Red Wings home game, the vast majority going directly to our Patreon supporters. So again, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. If you want to join the show and join the Dub Club, as Steve Dangle named it back in the day. Okay. The Red Wings lost both games. Let's just put that out there right now. It's a somber mood because the Red Wings world is in a somber mood. We try not to get too doom and gloom, but we also aren't going to BS you in terms of where things are at for the Red Wings right now. After a strong start against Anaheim, they lost that game, and then they lost against the Kings, which was predictable. We're going to break down the details for you in a second, but this is the tone where the Red Wings are at, and this feels like a pivotal moment in the season. I said last episode that whenever you set an arbitrary, benchmark or a goalpost in the middle of a season like this in an 82-game NHL season, it still is arbitrary no matter which way you cut it. Points-wise, Detroit isn't out of it. Everything's still so tight, but I genuinely do believe that the the critical mass either has been reached or is very close to being reached in the Red Wings world. So the Red Wings fall to the Ducks 6-4, and it didn't need to be that way. The game started with an Olen Zellweger goal that, came pretty early, a minute into the game, and Detroit was down 1-0, and we thought, is this going to be it for Detroit where automatically it's going to get away from them? But it wasn't the case. For the rest of the first period, we saw Marco Kasper's first career NHL goal on the power play. He got the puck in space and fired it past Gibson, who did not have a good game. Kasper, really great moment for him. That was coming. We talked on a recent episode about how his play has been good. The production hasn't been there, but he was doing the things you like to see. Nice to see Compher also pick up the puck. Seider assisted on that. It was a power play goal, unsurprising because it's the Red Wings. And then before the period was over, Jonatan Berggren scored also on the power play in his, office on the right side of the net. He was cleaning up there. It's where we've seen him produce before. Tarasenko and Kasper. Kasper's first career multi-point game, assisting on that. Another power play goal for Detroit. You're like, wow, things are going well. This is Detroit's MO. It's power play production, but this is what they're going to do. And in the second period, Alex DeBrincat finds Lucas Raymond for a great breakout pass, banks it off the boards. Raymond breaks down, and Raymond, who's been snake bitten, we've said he's probably been Detroit's best forward in terms of overall play, but not in terms of goal scoring, especially only his second goal of the season. But again, broke the goal scoring drought. You're like, this is how Detroit needed to start this West Coast road trip. And then that was it. Before the end of the second period, Simon Edvinsson blocked a shot, took a puck to the knee, tried to play, ended up leaving the game for good in the third period. But before the end of the second, Treovr Zegras also scored on the power play. And it was all Ducks from there on out. Detroit got one more power play goal from Alex DeBrincat to make it 5-4 after Anaheim was up 5-3. But they scored the empty netter, and Detroit never really factored into the play after the Raymond goal in my mind in a meaningful way. Alex Lyon had a stinker of a game. There were very few Red Wings who I thought had a good game from that point on. And it was against the Anaheim Ducks. That's not the LA Kings the next night. That's the Anaheim Ducks. They are in the tier of the league that Detroit is in, standings-wise and 5-on-5 offense-wise. Like, that's one of the worst teams in the league. And they walked all over Detroit.
Depending on what analytic you look at, there's very, very few teams worse at producing 5-on-5 offense than the Detroit Red Wings. Anaheim is one of them. And they dropped, I know not every goal is 5-on-5, but they dropped 6 on you when you had a lead. There was a lot that game that bothered me. A lot. Even going back and rewatching some of the highlights. Yeah, Lyon, you can throw a lot at him that game. It was terrible.
It was a bad game from Lyon.
Obviously, losing Edvinsson's going to be a huge blow to morale because obvious reasons. But even in the first period, I don't know if this is just me nitpicking because this has been a problem for this team all year. We've had numerous conversations about this team's give a shit level seems to be low way, way more often than it's high. I look for emotion out of this team because we've talked about this. Yzerman has a type. He signs him in free agency. He trades for him. He drafts him. He wants that 200-foot, high compete, run through a wall type of player. And he goes out and gets those players. You would think give a shit would be a strength of this team. They're not a high-skilled team. We've went over that. And where they are in the rebuild, it's kind of hard to expect them to be a high-skilled team. Could Yzerman have built better than this? Yeah. But there would have been a ceiling based on what was available. But you can compensate for that by being a pain in the ass team. St. Louis almost won a Stanley Cup, did win a Stanley Cup by being almost exactly that. And I watched this Red Wings team time in and time out not hit anybody on the forecheck. Chip and chase is a theory at best. The forecheck's non-existent. If you're going to be weak in the D zone or have weaker players in the D zone, you can be hard to play against. You can make teams second guess going in behind the net for a puck or standing at the top of the crease. Don't see any of that. And then the biggest issue, remember last year how many comebacks the Red Wings had? Their resolve was off the charts. Where the hell did that go? Like
the team looks...
When Anaheim scored that fourth goal, how much money would you have wagered the Red Wings were going to lose that game despite how much time was left?
All.
everything I own.
Very little, yeah.
Because that's the identity of this team. This is a team that does not give a shit. And I know that sounds harsh. I'm not lumping all 20, 23 players in this, but it's a majority. And you can say they care, but do they? Like, NHL levels of care, especially for a team that's being built to be this ultimate pain in the ass, high compete team to compensate for a lack of skill. Again, I talked about it first or second episode of the season. It's not that they're bad. They're predictably bad. I don't think we predicted they wouldn't care and they would look like this. We knew they were going to have struggles covering in the D zone. Yeah, it's frustrating to watch when it happens, but you're like, it's going to happen with the roster they have. They have trouble transporting the puck. It's frustrating to watch. Again, you look at the roster and go, understandable. Not a lot of offensive zone time. Okay. Again, predictable, frustrating to watch, but you're like, yeah, it's going to happen. Nothing on this team to try and overcome it. It's absolutely maddening to watch.
And the thing is, like, we're all pushed back is I think the team does care, but I think the team, it looks like on the ice, they feel as despondent as the fans feel watching the game at
But that's
points.
my point.
Yeah, and to me, that's going to lead into the coaching conversation after this. Like, they feel it's a listless watch. Like, you're watching this and you're like, wow, I'm glazing over. And the players look the exact same way. Their body language shows that. The way you see post-game interviews, you see the way they play on the ice. Like, it does feel like the energy has been sapped from this team. And I don't think if they went out there and just started, punching people in the face and, doing things to try to motivate each other, that would be a sustainable. It's not that there's a lack of these guys going out there and caring about their teammates. This is a symptom of the larger dysfunction that exists throughout the entire team. And there's a bigger conversation, which is what we're here to do today, about how much of that is because of the roster makeup and, bad roster begets bad play and bad play begets blah, blah, blah. And how much of that is just because the way this team is being motivated and put together and what they're being asked to do on the ice is creating this. Like, has the voice in the room from the coaching staff been lost on the team? No matter what it is, you can't deny. I can push back on the small details, Brad. That's what I do. I nitpick at you. But you're right. This team feels lifeless to watch. And that's when things in the fan base get... You're right. Like, when something makes you mad or it's really that upsetting, you see it everywhere and it becomes bigger. Because then it's a bigger conversation of, we're never getting out of this rebuild. Everything is lost. Like, there's no future for this team, et cetera, et cetera. And that's fundamentally untrue. But I also cannot fault fans who are watching this team for the first 16, 17 games and saying, this all feels like, what's the point? Like, how are you going to show me a light at the end of the tunnel? It got smaller from last season to this season. And even if the fundamental truths of what the core is on this team and what the prospects coming are and, how things are shaping up and what actually matters are what they are, it still sucks to watch this, and it's not a sustainable way to play hockey, even if you are meant to be bad. Detroit lost that game 6-4, and you can tell these conversations were already happening. They lose against Anaheim the next night, under 24 hours later, against the LA Kings, and by that point, my indications were that Simon Edvinsson was intending to play, and he went out there for warm-ups, left warm-up early. And right then and there, like, he was wincing practically coming into the arena, and it did not look good when he left warm-up early. And I thought, nope, he's not going. And what everyone thought, already the worst vibes possible are out there for the Red Wings and their fans. But what everyone thought was going to be the case came to fruition, which is a Detroit Red Wings lineup with no Simon Edvinsson, which means this defense, which we have been saying all season, is one injury away from being a total disaster compared to a somehow not completely drowning because Edvinsson and Seider are keeping them afloat disaster. It all happened. And the game went as predicted. Detroit was outshot by a much better team, 41-18. I think they were outshot by a ratio of nearly 3-1 after two periods. Detroit scored one goal just to spoil the shutout at the end. It was Dylan Larkin scoring his 10th of the season. But that was all LA all game. The stupid irony of it is like, okay, Talbot's in, he's the better goalie. He let in a soft goal on the first goal, and it's not like that made the difference. LA was just, they were all over Detroit. Detroit, is not playing like a functional team after that Anaheim game. They are down Simon Edvinsson. And if you look at the usage charts, Derek Lalonde is horrified, justifiably, I'll say, to play anyone other than Seider and whoever he's paired with, whether it be Edvinsson or whoever's stepping in while Edvinsson's hurt. Like, Seider played over 10 minutes. I think it was 10 minutes, 16 seconds of the first period. Over 50% of the first period alone. Everyone else is just as sheltered as possible. You look at Gustafsson and Johansson, look at their usage. He does not trust them with a defensive zone start at all. And I can't disagree. You have Johansson, who is a rookie, who is, by his own standards, remove the context of what Detroit needs from their defenseman. Fine enough. He's going about his path this season. He's developing. He's not Edvinsson and Seider. You can't hold him to that. And you have Gustafsson, who's, my God, has that been a failure of a signing so far? And those two can't be trusted with a defensive zone start. You have to play Petry and Sherrod or whoever on the second pair. Holl, guarantee that they're going to be walked around at least once a period, and it's still objectively the right call. Like, it was a hopeless endeavor. The whole game could be summarized by it was 4-1, and the one only served to spoil a shutout. That's it.
I'm going to give an anecdote about my biggest problem with this game, and it's so similar to the Anaheim game. So Mika has this funny habit, as most 8-year-olds do, where if she has a bad night's sleep or it's her fourth ice time in 4 days, or she's just tired or not feeling well, Crystal and I always joke because we can tell by the end of warmups if she's going to have a good game or not. Like, when she's feeling it, she's flying around, she's vibing, she's joking around with her teammates, ripping shots, calling for pucks. And then on her off days, she's just kind of cruising around. She's like out there, but like, mentally not there. She's just trying to get through the game, not going to be a strong game, whatever, a passenger. So I can usually tell if this 8-year-old, by the end of warmups, at the very least, by the end of her first or second shift, is going to have a good game. When I can do the same thing with a whole ass professional hockey team, what are we doing here? How many shifts into that game did it take you to realize this is going to be a long night?
There was one moment where I think Ken was lucky to even catch a breath because LA had them hemmed in that much. And it was like, yeah, well, that's what you expected. That's what it was for the game.
Maybe I'm old school, losing my mind. You can tell me if I'm crazy. If I was going into a game in minor hockey, even as an adult, if one of our best players was out or we were playing our backup goalie who is substantially weaker than our starter, we had extra pep. We're like, all right, we know we got a bigger challenge tonight. Let's step it up a bit. Let's empty the tank. We're going full bore tonight, whatever we got. See if we can squeak this one out against all odds. Feels like the Red Wings are waiting for everybody else to do that for them. Hey, maybe Larkin will carry us tonight. Oh, no, Edvinsson tonight? Dang, it's going to be a tough night for Mo. Hope he can do it. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm being unfair, but it feels like the vibe. They don't, when the adversity hits, they crumble. They don't want to rise to the occasion. And I understand, and we're going to talk about it later, the limitations this team has.
Because what the players do that are not the best players on Detroit? What can the depth do? 5-on-5 offense? Nothing. Defense? Nothing.
You know what you can do, though? And I talked about it in the Anaheim game. You can make it a long night for LA. You might lose, but it ain't going to be easy. You're not going to go down without a fight. And I understand the Red Wings, even by Lalonde's system, are a little limited to that because it's such a conservative hangback style. But the opportunities are there. It's not like you're not allowed to go hit someone. It's not like you're allowed to maybe give that puck an extra poke when it's in the crease. You know what I mean? Like, if you're going to be in it, be in it. Make it a tough night for the other team. And has there been a game this year the Red Wings opponent have felt uncomfortable? There's been games the Red Wings have been better than their opponents. Like Pittsburgh comes to mind recently. The Rangers game. It's like, yeah,
sure. Yeah.
I get it. They're the better team, but did Pittsburgh or the Rangers ever feel uncomfortable those games?
No, it's not Detroit's identity at all this year.
So if you're not a skill team and you're not a gritty team, what the hell are you? And this Kings game to me felt like I shouldn't even say the Kings game. These two games felt like the perfect encapsulation of it. They get out against Anaheim. We're the better team, laying it to them. They look like the better team. First sign of adversity. Oh, and now they're shut down for the next 4.5 periods.
This is the argument for, the Red Wings were expected to be bad because this is the roster that was given to Derek Lalonde. But should they be listless and lacking in an identity like this? And that's the argument. And I think you put that really well. We're going to come back to that. Detroit lost these 2 games. Edvinsson didn't play against, the third period in Anaheim and then against LA. I'm going to simplify this. If Edvinsson is out for any extended period of time, barring some kind of move from Yzerman to supplement that defense in a top 4, like a bona fide top 4 way, that might be curtains on any ambition of the season. If anyone has any ambition for the season moving forward, like that's it. And I don't just mean like, oh, no other player could be good. Like look with your eyes or look analytically or look with both. I don't care. Any combination will prove that Detroit without Seider and Edvinsson is sunk because you don't have the 5-on-5 offense. And even if your goaltender is playing really well, you can't have a terrible defense, terrible 5-on-5 offense, terrible PK and win the game. It just isn't sustainable. Like if Edvinsson is out for any period of time here, that's it.
2 thoughts come to mind immediately. One, this really does feel like the inverse of that post-Chicago episode last year, where we were ready to declare a playoff spot. This year, we're ready to write the season off.
And that's, if you're mad at us, we're just trying to reverse jinx this.
1,000% we're doing. If we get an injury report before next episode, and because I'm with you, and I'm going to say this is a joke, but there's a lot of truth behind it. If we find out before next episode, Simon Edvinsson is out for 6 weeks or longer, do we start with Martone or Hagens next episode?
I think we have to start with one of them because we're going to keep circling back.
We're going to get through 3rd-round prospects at this pace because
we're also going to have to start recording earlier because there's going to be an hour of sobbing to edit out.
Well, that could just be the episode.
That's true. Yeah.
If we can't be pleasant or optimistic, we could at least be cathartic for the listeners.
God.
It's an emotional support group. I love that acting the Foolaman. Sports are not meant to be enjoyed or have fun. It's meant to be sad in a group.
Yep. That's what it feels like. If Edvinsson is out, that's a very simple calculation. Now, if he comes back in, then the problem still exists that we're about to talk about here. But that is a miracle for the Red Wings. And it's not like they're all of a sudden not, a lottery team or not struggling defensively still, et cetera, et cetera. But this team is incredibly thin on defense. They're thin in a lot of areas, but they're incredibly thin on defense. And we've been saying, and now has come to pass, they are 1 injury away from catastrophe, and that's what's hanging in the balance here. So we'll see if he's back against San Jose Monday night, but ugh.
Yeah, at least with Edvinsson, again, all the defensive issues remain, but at least then you're getting 20 to 25 good defensive minutes a game, which is 20 to 25 minutes more than they would get without him.
Is he a top pairing defenseman on every team in the league right now? Absolutely not. Is he far and away more than sufficient and a game changer in terms of what Detroit's top pair can do? Absolutely. And with Detroit, like a lot of games, the power play carries the offense, and a lot of games, the goaltending saves them from when they're having a tough spot. You don't see it because it's more invisible on defense with the defensive zone starts and what they're tasked with doing, and it masks the production. But Seider and Edvinsson are rowing this boat just as much as anyone else. So that's what's hanging in the balance. Before we go to break, the San Jose game. Is that if this is also bad, then things are changing, they have to change here and now moment for you? Are you already there? Or are you saying, no, I have a different benchmark, or you can't arbitrarily assign that much weight to an out-of-conference game on the road at the end of a road trip?
It will depend entirely on how they look that game. If they lose to San Jose because they get goalied while outshooting them 35 to 25, whatever, it happens. Like it was like they lost to the Rangers 4-0, and we came away from that game with positive reviews. Like, man, they were all over me. Got goalied. It happens. And they couldn't hit the broadside of a barn with the puck that game, but still, they were generating the chances. If it looks anything like the Anaheim or the LA game, the panic button is being smashed. It's being thrown out the window. We're calling the fire department. I don't know if Homeland Security will get involved, but I'm going to try.
Okay, let's say they win 5-0, complete game, everyone top to bottom looks great. Are you going back and then rescinding what we're going to talk about today? Is that level of confidence instilled by the game?
I know this episode's been bleak, but we are not that far removed from a couple very good games from Detroit. Again, the Rangers we talked about, the Penguins game we talked about, we're not that far removed from them. But when you look at the balance of the season, they're teetering. They're on the edge right now, and I don't think it's going to take a lot to push them over the edge. The camel's there. The straws are on the back. It might only take one more.
We're going to go to break, and when we're back, we're going to talk about Steve Yzerman, Derek Lalonde, and whether change is needed in Detroit. There is nothing that compares to watching hockey live. It's not just about being closer to the action. It's hearing the sounds of the game, feeling the big hits along the boards. I personally will never forget how electric it was to be in the crowd for the last playoff win at the Joe. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to games or whatever concert or show you want to go to even easier. I went on the Game Time app to check out tickets for the Flyers at Red Wings game at the LCA on December 18th, and the tickets that really caught my eye were in their Super Deal category. $108 for lower bowl, 8 rows up from the ice. They also had deals in their Amazing Deal category like mezzanine seats from $60, and in their Great Deal category including upper bowl seats from just $22. Buying tickets on Game Time is by far the easiest, best experience I've had buying hockey or concert tickets. My personal favorite feature is the integrated seat views, giving you a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. I'm huge on trying out new spots around the arena and getting the most ideal seats possible for shows, so I use Game Time seat views constantly. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code WINGEDWHEEL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code WINGEDWHEEL Winged Wheel for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. This episode of the Winged Wheel podcast is proudly brought to you by Labatt Blue Light. Created in 1983, this premium light Canadian Pilsner is a delicately balanced beer brewed with Cascade hops and a blend of malt. It's fresh, crisp, and brewed to the highest quality standards. There's a little bit of Canadian kindness in every sip of Labatt Blue Light. How did it get in there? They're Canadian. That's how. You can spread the love yourself by sharing a Labatt. And when you do share a Labatt, you're not just sharing a beer. You're sharing an experience that'll pair with anything from hockey to a hoedown. So next time you're watching hockey with your buds, be sure to share a Labatt, because while you might not all root for the same team, although we on this podcast do hope you're rooting for Detroit, you can all enjoy a Labatt Blue Light. We honestly love going to games in Detroit and seeing Labatt being the beer that fans clamor for all over the arena. It's a reliable beer, and it's great to have in your hand when celebrating a goal. So head to the link in the description of this episode or the one you see on your screen to find Labatt in stores near you today. You must be 21 or older, and as always, enjoy responsibly. Welcome back. You don't need to be on social media for long to find out what the loudest cry is right now from the Red Wings fan base about the change that they think needs to happen. It's not unanimous, and there's different variations of it, but by and large, the biggest voice is to call for Steve Yzerman to move on from Derek Lalonde as head coach of the Detroit Red Wings. And that begs the question of a lot of things, is not just, Derek Lalonde's performance this season and the Red Wings performance and how much is on him and how much is on Steve Yzerman and the roster he gave him, and can the lifeless nature of the Red Wings be blamed on the roster or Lalonde, or is it a combination of both? But it also begs the question of what were actual expectations for the season from the fans' perspective, from an objective point of view, looking at the roster, from the organization's perspective, all of it. But it's getting to a point where it does feel, like I said earlier, it feels like we're at a critical mass, a boiling point. And like you said, Brad, there's a lot of straw in the camel's back. And is that last one already there, or is there some leeway for Lalonde yet? But where are you at on this? Because I don't think this is a conversation that can be avoided or should be avoided at this point, transparently.
This is a problem I can look at two different ways. If I look at the entirety of Lalonde's tenure with Detroit, I come away impressed. I don't think the Red Wings had very good rosters the last 2 years, and I think he got more out of them than I think we would have expected them. They were literally a tiebreaker away from making the playoffs last year, and the Red Wings were not a big pick to make the playoffs. I did not have them making the playoffs last year. And to me, that's an overperformance. Yeah, how they got there was a little cause for concern. I would have liked to have seen a little less turbulence, a little more consistency. But again, how much is that the roster? How much is that the coaching? Now, consistency, I do tend to look at the coach. Goaltending can also skew that. It's the age-old joke. Look at a coach on the hot seat, just sort the stats page by save percentage. If I looked at just this year, I'd have been done with him already. Because, again, for all the reasons I ranted about from the games this weekend, how does a team look this listless and predictable? It's tough. But then you look at the results. You can coach up a power play. The power play is really good. You can coach up systematic defense. And when you look at the Red Wings 5-on-5 defensive results relative to the talent he has to work with, it's impressive. But then you look at the PK, which is also, I think, largely coaching, and it's atrocious. So there are so many ways you can be swayed in this argument based on what your highest priority is. I'm not at the point where I'm standing at the edge of the cliff ready to kick him into it. But there's a lot of warning signs. And when you hear hockey types talk about coaching shelf life, like guys only got so long and then they lose the room.
Mm-hmm.
The way things are going right now, it's hard to not think he's losing the room just because of the effort and the consistency issues and all of that. Yeah, I really like the guy. I really liked what he did with the team in the last 2 years. But this season in a bubble, boy, it's hard to come away with a positive impression. And it could just be the shelf life thing rearing its ugly head. And he's one of the top 10 most tenured coaches in the NHL. Like, that's how cyclical this job is. And
yeah,
it's justifiable. Justifiable is probably the word I'm at right now. If they let him go tomorrow, I get it. I'm not all the way there yet, but I get it.
Where I'm at on this is, I think oftentimes, especially in the world of professional sports where results and what have you done for me lately reign supreme, reality doesn't care about context. And the context is Derek Lalonde has a terrible defensive roster to work with. The reality is, as you said, Brad, the coaching cycle is short, aggressive, vicious in the NHL, and it's only been trending more in that direction. And the reality is sometimes things come into play in terms of, the team is losing the message or not playing the way you want them to play or whatever because of circumstances outside of your control. The goalie had a bad night. The Gustafsson signing didn't work out, whatever it might be. And I'm not absolving Lalonde of all blame here because I agree with you. This season alone, it's not just the team, it's the coaching staff who have also been a failure by and large. But this feels like a thing where factors that can be attributed to Lalonde and factors that can't be attributed to Lalonde are both factoring into the overall impression and evaluation of Lalonde's performance as a coach. If the room is no longer showing up and, playing consistently and being motivated and hearing the message that the coach is delivering, then it doesn't matter how you got there. We've seen a lot of times in the NHL, sometimes a new voice is needed. And I'm in the exact same spot as you. I'm not fully there, but I'm not there necessarily. I hate calling for someone's job. That's not really what I'm doing here, but it's to say if that's the impression that management has, that it's anything about, how the room is responding to Lalonde, then a change has to come. If it's not that and it's genuinely all just like the roster at hand, then, I can see a reason to stick it out and see if, you make a change on who's running the PK or things like that. It's not perfectly in the middle, to put it gently. It's definitely trending in the direction of the Red Wings need a change here. But then I also struggle with, we can't skate past the small point I made in there that I just, brushed right by and start talking about Lalonde again, which is Steve Yzerman gave Derek Lalonde a terrible roster this season to work with, especially on defense. Like, how much different would this conversation be if Detroit had anything beyond a first pair to work with. The goaltending's been there. The power play has been there. Your top pair has been stellar. It would have been enough based on the points that we've seen so far where we might have been saying, oh, this 5-on-5 offense is concerning. Derek Lalonde has to figure this out, but they're still alive and no one's calling for his job. But there's a GM aspect to this too, and the pro scouting has let down this team just as much in my mind. It's just on a much more macro scale and it's less immediate.
It's a boring conversation to have, but the game of hockey under the salary cap's turning into a game of market efficiencies versus inefficiencies. Where's your value coming from? Where are you getting extra value for your dollar? And where are you losing value on your dollar? And this isn't a referendum on the whole Yzer plan, because obviously with Seider, Raymond, Larkin's contracts, long-term, the prospect pool, there's a lot of reasons for optimism going forward. This team, before they traded Mata, was right up against the cap, and the cap management to get them to that position was nothing short of atrocious. Like, I love Yzerman, and again, I see long-term what he's trying to do, but this iteration of the team, like, you run through it. Who has negative value relative to their contract? You look at the defense. Schrott, Petry, Holl, Gustafsson. There's 2/3 of your defense. Market inefficiency. You look at several key forward spots. Tarasenko, not worth the contract, not playing up to it. Comfer this season, not worth what he's getting paid. Kopp, Rasmussen, probably a couple more I'm forgetting. It's a game of inefficiencies, and the Red Wings have a shocking amount relative to even league average teams. It's every team has bad contracts. I just listed out, 8 that aren't even debatable? That's a problem. And yeah, you can argue what Lalonde's done, but he's trying to do it with 2 hands tied behind his back right now. And it doesn't mean you have to stand still with 2 hands behind your back. You can still move. But man, again, I'm not out on the Yzer plan, but the short term, everything he led to this is terrible.
And that's the path out, right? Where I say I'm not move on from the coach because that's the solution. Because the next guy who comes in, if that's the path they go, still has to play that very same roster. It's going to take sweeping change. And, this is a complicated conversation to have because I don't want to go too far down one path and imply that the context has changed or that, all the nuance is done, because you also have to look at, what did I open with? Does this season really matter? Does this season matter over the course of the rebuild? No. Does this season matter to the Red Wings management, the players, and the fans? Yes. There's differing opinions on whether or not, the management actually cares about this season. And I think it's agreeable that they know this season isn't going to be a cup run season. That's not the expectation from them. But the expectation for management for the season is definitely that they were going to be at least comparable to last season. They would understand if they took a bit of a step back. They would understand if they were able to overperform shooting percentages again, for example, and offense was great, and take a bit of a step forward. I don't think management wanted or would have been happy with coming to the season this kind of performance in terms of on-ice display. Like that, and again, that's pushing the needle back in. Even if expectations were low for the season, should they be this bad? And that's the argument again for Derek Lalonde has a job to do with 2 hands behind his back, but it still shouldn't be this rough. So, what does moving this around in the long term mean for the overall rebuild and the Yzer plan, or whatever you want to call it? Nothing. No, so maybe not nothing.
Say nothing. In a sick and twisted way, might be a positive. The top of this draft is very forward heavy.
Yeah, but
with offensively gifted players, which we might start talking about a little sooner than we'd like.
And that's another thing, though, because if you're writing off this season and your management, you're like, this isn't a playoff team. Even if things go a lot better, what pace do they need to play at now? Like 95 to 100 points, if not more pace now to make the playoffs at a rough projection. So I think it's very likely that the reality is setting in that this team, if they lose the San Jose game or any kind of appreciable amount of games in the next few weeks here, we're not even in their December doldrums, which is practically an annual tradition, then this season is a write-off, and you're looking at Porter, Martone, Hagens, etc. Then do you even let go Lalonde, or do you see it out? Or are you thinking about the fans are getting restless and butts are no longer in seats as much and you're struggling to get engagement? And I'll tell you, Red Wings fans are tuning out. Red Wings fans are verifiably tuning out from this team right now. Apathy is not just on the ice. It is even more so from the fan base. And can you blame them? Because it is not a fun watch right now. And not that every game needs to be a thrilling 7-0 dominant offensive victory like you have the Russian 5 out there or the 0-2 Red Wings, but it is a dull watch. And most of the time, the results aren't good. So the organization has questions to answer in terms of the keeping the fans invested. It's only November. It's halfway through November. And you know what's best for the long-term run.
And we're not even at Thanksgiving yet, which is usually the benchmark for most teams as to what they really are. The Red Wings are one hot streak away in the next couple weeks to being like, everything's fine here. As you were, people. We're good.
Yeah, they're due to make us look stupid. Like, we know that's what's coming.
Which is fine. That's what we're hoping for with the reverse jinx here. But also the one part we haven't talked about is they're probably not moving on from Lalonde and going back to another first-time head coach.
That's the thing.
And
you did it with Blashill.
Yep.
You did it with Lalonde. And everyone is saying, Carl or Dan Watson. No, I would bet a lot that they would be going back to the experience pool. And you've seen Vancouver did it with Tocchet. Like, that's...
And don't get me wrong. In a bubble, outside of all the context, I'd love Dan Watson or Carl to be the head coach of the Red Wings if they did decide to move on from Lalonde. But they're not going to do that. So you have to look at what's out there. And if there's a guy you want, you have to make your move before somebody else snaps him up. Because there's a lot of teams, not a lot, but there's some teams that are in the same boat as the Red Wings right now. Hell, Boston.
Which, ironically enough,
if Montgomery became available, he probably shoots to the top of the list of who the Red Wings would look at. But there is a unique opportunity out there right now because of some gross, icky, awful circumstances. But a coach like Joel Quenneville's not sitting there any other year. And not sweeping what happened in Chicago under the rug, because it still pisses me off to all holy hell. But it takes a circumstance like that for a coach like Quenneville and his coaching talent. Again, you can make what you want of the man, but there's no denying coaching, he's top tier.
Yeah.
And he's sitting there. And if you are moving on from Lalonde, are they weighing in their head, we have to scoop him up before another team does? They might not even want him because of all the circumstance and everything that goes. But it's at least worth mentioning because there's no way that's not a thought that hasn't crossed their mind.
That is the biggest name being talked about publicly. That's the biggest name going around privately. The way coaching searches go, by and large, there's always variations of this, but in the NHL, when a GM or management group thinks they're going to move on from their head coach, most of the time they don't just fire the guy and then start their search. They actually reach out to the coaches and their agents in advance. They say, hey, if we make a move, what's the interest here? It's not like trading for players where the player has to come. Like, there needs to be buy-in from the coach. And what would you be looking for? What kind of term? What kind of compensation? Would you be willing to relocate here? That kind of thing. And it's not just one guy, it's multiple. I would bet everything that the Red Wings have already, at least explored that option. It just makes sense logically, knowing how this process goes. I will say, if the sense is that Detroit is definitely going to move on from Derek Lalonde, which who knows, but if the sense is they are, and we get past Thanksgiving and they haven't, done it and brought in Quenneville, my guess would be that Quenneville is calling his shot and is preferring other options, because the Quenneville conversation has come up before, and the sense out there has been he doesn't really want to go and rebuild. Like, he wants to go to a system or a team. Think about what he got pulled away from in Florida. He wants to go somewhere there where success is a little bit more immediate. Detroit would have a hard time selling that. So that's part of the Quenneville conversation too.
It is worth mentioning, though, this isn't too dissimilar from when he got to Chicago, a team that was on the come up. Now, he had Taves and Kane there. The Red Wings don't.
They have a Kane.
Well,
they have Raids and Kane. That's the best I could do. I'm sorry. Evan's not here to roll his eyes at me.
So they're not quite in the same spot, but they're in a similar-ish spot. And also, given the context, he might not be welcomed by all 32 teams. He might not be welcomed by Detroit for all we know, but they've probably had the conversation and they might settle on, yeah, we'll eat it and we'll hire him. It's if I'm Quenneville, if I'm being honest, I'm probably staring long and hard at what's going on in Boston right now. So maybe waiting on what happens there, but then that's not a super significant issue for Detroit if they do decide to move on from Lalonde, because if Boston ends up scooping up Quenneville, well, Montgomery's on the market. So,
and if you're Montgomery and you want to coach again right away, imagine being able to coach for an Atlantic Division team.
Yeah. So there's a lot of balls up in the air.
McClellan's out there.
Yeah, which I'm less convinced about him as a coach, but he is a good coach. There's so much that goes into a decision of moving on from the coach. Are we writing this season off? Is there a better candidate available? What's the right time to do it if we do decide to do it? Oh man, it's such a tricky subject, but like we talked about off the hop here, with the way the last few games have gone, they're teetering. It's right there. This season can go a lot of ways in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think you and I, even with qualifying it as, not fully there and accepting that if they do move on, it doesn't change the actual core issues with this version of the Red Wings. Again, not a referendum on the rebuild, the future of the Yzer plan, none of that. This version of the Red Wings, still, if they continue on this path against San Jose and beyond, and we're at Thanksgiving and things have not taken an optimistic turn again, then I think we'll both probably be there.
Yeah,
it goes without saying.
We've had this whole conversation without even referencing the standings. I'm not going to talk about the Red Wings reference to a playoff spot because it's more interesting to look that they're almost in dead last in the Atlantic, and they are a bottom 7 team in the entire NHL right now. And I think the team sitting right behind them could pass them with games in hand. So, oh, hey, 6th overall again. Wouldn't that be neat?
Stop, Brad.
And if they fall even further, they're still going to fall back to 6th overall because that's how this works.
Do you I don't know. It almost makes sense to say, yeah, if the Red Wings really believe that this season's a write-off, then you just continue. You continue and you let Lalonde coach out the season and see if anything changes because of the lottery aspect to this. But then again, the Red Wings have said publicly, it is a priority for them business-wise to be more competitive. And can you really afford, how bad were things? How long did it take to get out of the losing mindset for the Red Wings? The last season was a real first time we saw that sustainably. Can you do that to Seider and Larkin and Raymond? Can you do that to Edvinsson, who is already a part of your core in his effective rookie season? Can you do that to Kasper? You want to bring up Danielson. You want to bring up Kosa. There's ramifications to this beyond just this season. This season doesn't matter for the rebuild. This season still matters. As illogical as that seems, I think both are true.
Well, depending where they finish, it could help the rebuild. It could hurt the rebuild. But again, I think it comes down to what's available, because they may decide Quenneville's the guy for the future, but they need to grab him now because he might not be sitting there in May or June or July.
He might not be sitting there at Christmas.
Exactly. So, yeah, it's easy to say you write off the season, get a good draft pick, and then replace the coach in the offseason if that's the path they so choose. Might not be anybody good sitting there in May, June, July. And then they're just sitting going, wow, we don't like any of these options. We are screwed. So, you got to strike while the iron's hot, so to speak. And McClellan and Quenneville sitting out there mid-season's not normal.
I make this comparison a lot, but when you're doing a fantasy draft and someone grabs Vasilevsky and then there's just a run of goalies, I feel like there's all this pressure being built up at the dam of the coaching carousel, and all it takes for it to burst is one change, one team to pull the trigger, and then I think you're going to see a cascade after that. Doesn't happen as quickly as it does in the offseason where it's like bang, 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 but still, I think you're going to see this move relatively quickly if it does. Derek Lalonde's time with the Red Wings, I think, hinges on how things go moving forward. And he could buy himself more runway, months even, if things go extraordinarily well. But we're not having this conversation unless the trends and the, what we've seen so far are bad enough to have this conversation. We're not interested in pouring gasoline on a fire. We're not interested in, advocating for change just for the sake of change, because again, all the same issues are going to persist. But this is the reality of where Derek Lalonde, Steve Yzerman, and the Red Wings are at. So It's a big old, we'll see how that one goes. Other Red Wings news quickly here. Jack Campbell was put on waivers today, which from that you can infer that Jack Campbell has become eligible to return to NHL play after being in the Players Assistance Program. Him going down on waivers was always the plan for the Red Wings from the start because he wasn't waiver exempt. And when they signed him, his plan wasn't to be on the Red Wings. So they want him down with the Grand Rapids Griffins. Then you have to send him through waivers. So it means he's returning to play. They're waiving him. Stands to reason he's not going to be claimed, and he'll go down to Grand Rapids from there. So hope this means Campbell is doing well personally, and we're wishing him the best, and we'll see how that affects Detroit's goalie trio, quad, whatever you want to call it, now moving forward. Because, I mean, Kosa and Husso are doing quite well for the Griffins down there. Elsewhere for the Red Wings, just want to put a note here. It seems minor, but credit to Emmitt Finnie, who's making some noise for potentially, I honestly think he has a chance of being a World Junior player for Team Canada. In, 18 games for Kamloops so far, he has 13 goals, 16 assists for 29 points. It's the kind of season you were expecting Finnie to have based on how he's played so far and his age in the WHL, but still, he is showing up for Kamloops, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him get consideration for the World Juniors.
I think he's got a decent chance for it. I have to laugh. One reverse jinx definitely worked for us this offseason where we were really high on what the Red Wings have done in the first round of the draft, but we're like, man, they didn't get a lot of skill outside of the first round, and all of a sudden this year it's just like Lombardi, Buchelnikov, and Finnie are like, oh yeah?
Yeah.
We'll show you, which is good, because then that's another feather in Yzerman's cap in terms of, the long-term future of this team. And man, even if one of those guys hits in any sort of middle six capacity relative to where they were picked, phenomenal, especially Finnie's 7th round pick. Again, he doesn't have the dynamic enough skill that I think he's going to come in and be a point per game guy in the NHL, but good third liners very much on the table, which for a 7th round pick is a grand slam into the upper deck.
And you want to talk about other reasons for optimism. There needs to be a bigger conversation about Buchelnikov. We mentioned him, I think, last episode or the one before. Like he's potentially on record pace for a player his age in the KHL.
Like he's, I think, 7th or 8th in KHL scoring total. And he's not for U22 players, total. The whole league. He's having an insane season.
And he has a potential path over. And, we've always said about Buchelnikov, if he hits, he's going to hit for Detroit. Like
Finnie, as good as he's doing, doesn't have like that dynamic element that makes you think maybe this guy could be an upper echelon NHLer. Buchelnikov does. If he hits, he could hit substantially. Like we're talking top 6 forward power play, 20, 30 goals, 50, 60, dare I say more points in the NHL if it keeps going as well as it's going for him.
And there's obvious questions about will the size translate, things like that. And that's fair. But you also have to remember part of building out a roster where you have the size and the two-way that you have across the Red Wings lineup means when you have a player like that who is more dynamic in one area and less in others, then you can fit him into the lineup.
Well, the crazy thing, too, is when Buchelnikov was drafted, and even last season, you watch his game and you're like, this guy's a shooter, man. Like, this guy can just rip it from anywhere in the offensive zone, and like that alone might be enough to translate to the NHL. His assist numbers are dwarfing his goals this year. Now, I'm sure I know a few of those assists are just rebounds getting banged in, but most of them aren't. Like, this guy's got a playmaking element that we hadn't really seen before this year, which is another exciting thing. Because we always talk about with prospects. We project based on what we see, what we know. Every prospect at any point can develop a new skill, which completely changes their outlook. This could be that, because we never really talked about Buchelnikov with a dynamic playmaking element. We knew he wasn't devoid of it, but it wasn't a strength of his. Now, all of a sudden, if you're looking at an elite shooter who can toss the puck around at a pretty elite level, that changes the outlook completely. Yeah, skating and size still keep us from saying this is a surefire, definite home run, grand slam, whatever you want to call it. But the outlook is different now for the better.
Nate Danielson, another point of optimism. Look at the Marco Kasper arc last season where he started and you were like, a little bit of a rougher start. You see why he didn't make the Red Wings, and it raises some questions, but it's early. Let's see what he does. And what did he do after that is he became one of the best players on the Griffins and earned a spot on the Red Wings shortly afterwards. Nate Danielson in his first 8 games, I believe, had 2 points, and in his following 7 has 6. And he has really come alive for the Griffins, all while being that 200-foot player that we know he is. If this happens again for Detroit, again, we talked all this doom and gloom about this season. Wow, this sucks. You know, who's their real second-line center? Who's going to be their second pair right D, et cetera, et cetera. These prospects, like, a lot of them are hitting so far. Edvinsson, success. I think you have to call that one a success. And Kasper, you know, very firmly trending in that direction. Sandin Pellikka, Danielson. We'll see how MBN does when he eventually comes over to North America. Like, the points of optimism, Buchelnikov, Finnie, like, they are there and they're plentiful. And that's why whenever someone tries to convince you that, oh, everything has fallen apart and you're going to see a full teardown and full rebuild again for Detroit, no, you can't. That is silly. You can't take it that far. It is easy and understandable and agreeable to be upset about how this season is going because, my God, is it awful to watch at points. But the future in the background has been chugging along. Final thing on the Red Wings, very quietly, because obviously there's bigger conversations about Detroit, but Dylan Larkin is nearly on a 50-goal pace. I think he's technically on a 48-goal pace right now. Might be the weirdest Dylan Larkin career high in goals we've seen so far.
Power play is a hell of a drug.
Yes. Hey,
they count the same as even strength goals.
I shudder to think about what this season would feel like if the power play was also bad.
Oh, we would have started. We would have talked.
That's me knocking on wood.
I was gonna say we would have talked about Porter Martone on Halloween if the power play wasn't clicking.
They might be firing their second coach of the season.
Yeah,
if that was the case. Anyhow, just some Red Wings notes. More to come. Quick NHL news here, and I shouldn't even say quick. Big NHL news here. Elliot Friedman reported on Sportsnet that the NHL is due to go to a $92.4 million salary cap next season, just by the rules. Like, that's their scheduled increase. But based on revenues and how things are going, 95 to 97 million are numbers that are being put into play here. It does take an agreement between the NHL and the NHLPA because this is all, you know, prescribed in the CBA. But if they come to that agreement, that could be huge. And if you think about the contracts that Detroit has signed, just to put a specific Red Wings lens on this, they got Larkin in before this last big increase. They got Seider and Raymond in after this most recent increase, but before any other big ones. And we already thought the coming years were going to be a big jump. If they make this jump now, and the players in the Raymond Seider situations start to sign now, Detroit's deals for these guys look phenomenal. If they already look great in your mind, they're going to look fantastic.
Between those three and all the ELCs that could be coming through in 2, 3, 4 years, the Red Wings could be in an absolutely phenomenal cap situation. Now, we have seen what Yzerman has done when he has a lot of cap space, so there are big reasons for skepticism. But the first step is getting the cap space and having good value deals. And when your 3 best players are all on phenomenal value deals, that is the foundation for how you become a really good team. Because guess what? Those are big market efficiencies, which you need. ELCs are big market efficiencies. The formula is there. Where I will be out is once this cap space hits in a year or two, and if he starts screwing up with that, then I'm completely out on the Yzer plan. But this is what gives you hope in the Yzer plan, because if he does go get a Rantanen, a Marner, a big ticket guy, because they need one, and then the prospects start hitting, and you look at this, yeah, the outlook is dramatic.
Also remember that even though it doesn't make sense mathematically, he'll have a big leg to stand on and 3 star core players worth of leverage to stand on when he says to Edvinsson or anyone else, this is our internal ceiling. If I didn't give Mo Seider more than Dylan Larkin, I'm not giving you more than Mo Seider or Dylan Larkin or a forward comparable to Raymond or whatever it might be. And the agent and the player's argument will be, well, hold on, but the cap has gone up X%. And so, but again, the vibes dictate way more in hockey on the ice and off the ice than people would expect. And that is a big thing that has worked in teams' favor. I think the internal cap and the internal, ceiling on players based on their teammates who have signed previous, that's going away, but it's still there. So barring, Edvinsson coming out and just blowing past Seider's numbers and just being a complete superstar and being far and away better, that's another piece of leverage that makes this even better of a position for Detroit if they go in this direction in the NHL.
And with Edvinsson specifically, he's never going to be a big point producer, which is...
Could be, though.
Could be, but
think of a version of the Red Wings where he doesn't have all those defensive zone starts. We've seen the offensive touch.
Which isn't going to happen anytime soon. And when is his next contract due?
Yeah, I don't know, man. The NHL changes fast.
Edvinsson's going to be the guy sitting there going, I don't talk about anything other than a bridge. You need to give me some reasonable deployment before we start negotiating long term.
And Seider's going to be like, first time, huh? That's another pressure to say, you want a bridge? Raymond signed for 8. Seider signed for 7. You want a bridge? I don't know, man. Seems like you're not buying into what your teammates want you to buy into.
God, I love when toxic hockey culture works in our favor.
It's terrible when it's bad, but it's good when it's good, man. When it's convenient for my argument, boy, do I love it.
Yeah, exactly.
And what this means for the league is a lot of this is the rebound after COVID and revenues are starting to catch up, and viewership numbers aside, all the other things that really drive the revenue for the NHL, like TV deals, gate, it's all going to factor in.
And the players are going to be negotiating for a higher cap percentage or however that's calculated in the next CBA, which is coming up very soon.
Do you think they're going to get greater than 50%? Because I think the owners would,
I don't think they're going to get greater than 50%, but I think their argument's going to be what's considered HRR, because there's a lot of money within the system that isn't considered towards it yet.
HRR, hockey-related revenue.
Correct, yes. So I know expansion fees will never be part of that, but they're going to ask.
Yeah. And again, we said last episode, there doesn't seem to be, blood in the streets on this one. I'm hoping it works out. And I am going to be so clippably stupid saying this, but the NHL knows and should be able to avoid shooting themselves in the foot here.
And that's going to get played back right after I speak the sentence. It's been 3 months since this season was supposed to start.
But the NHL knows that in this world where everyone is rebounding from COVID, revenues are rebounding, everyone's jostling for the TV deals and to capture new fans and to keep up with what inflation has done, a lockout is suicide.
And with the way basketball and football and baseball and even soccer are growing, and the WNBA, and there's just so many more options out there, the NHL can't. And I think they're smart enough. Again, clip me.
Clip it.
They're smart enough to see that, it would be suicide. This is the worst possible time to go into something stupid like another lockout.
Only other NHL note I want to bring up is, did you see the Pittsburgh Penguins tweet out that their whole team was questionable with illness?
I understood what they were getting at. Everybody's sick, so we don't, we're going to have a team, but we don't know which 18 players specifically it's going to be. But yeah, it looked hilarious.
I read that a couple times. And sometimes you get a little hint when you see something pop up in your feed and it's just this innocuous tweet. You're like, why is this here? There must be something else there. So I reread it a couple times because I'm like, why would I be getting a Penguins, this player's out with illness tweet? And I was like, my eyes got wide. I checked the account to make sure it was the actual Penguins account. I reread it. I looked at it backwards. I put it up in front of the mirror. I was like, oh, whole team is questionable, huh? Did you also immediately get the picture of Sidney Crosby saying he didn't have the mumps while half of his face was swollen from way back in the day?
Oh, we couldn't be so lucky.
Anyways, that was funny. Okay. Weird toned episode. Lots of, that was just some optimism. Before that, a whole lot of doom and gloom and, incredibly tough conversation. So why don't we get into the fun stuff? Let's jump into overtime on this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast.
We're going to overtime.
Overtime is brought to you by our Patreon supporters. Again, patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast. If you want to support the show, the ticket giveaways, the bonus content, the Discord, all of that and lots more. Let's take some questions from our patrons. There are a lot of them, understandably, this episode.
I feel like without seeing them, there's going to be a theme.
Jim Kim Nutgit says, I guess December has 60 days this year. That's the theme.
So that's why you put your Christmas tree up already.
I'm a sicko, man. You know it. Although you'll notice that there's no ornaments, and that's because our big, stupid dog, the new one, not the old one, who's a perfect angel and she's never done anything wrong, Tully cannot be trusted. The moment we leave the house, we leave out decoy clothes for him to steal. He loves to steal clothes. Decoy paper products for him to steal. He loves to steal paper products. He will find what you love and he'll take it and he'll chew it.
Oh, we do the same thing with Hank.
My giant rescue dog, Brad's son. Which one are we talking about? Let's just start mixing up the names in the stories.
What was a joke from Brooklyn Nine-Nine? They couldn't figure out for a year if Kelly was Scully's wife or dog.
Yeah. Anyhow, Jim Kim Nuggets goes on to say, Max talked about the departure of Verbeek, the retirement of Mark Howe, prior to the now infamous 2022 free agent class in a recent mailbag. I'd love to hear you guys dig into the scouting department's turnover before that free agency, its impact on the current on-ice product, its impact on the immediate future, and what you might do to change the trajectory. Stay excellent. So, Verbeek and the loss of him and his pro scouting expertise. Not that it was perfect while he was there, but still, Mark Howe was there for a lot of time, and that was a lot of institutional knowledge. You know, we don't profess to know how that part of the Red Wings or even the league works, and it's not consistent from team to team. But you can't do anything but point at the results that by and large have turned out to be not worth the contracts that the Red Wings have brought in from a pro scouting, which means current NHL players standpoint, whether it be free agent signing, trades like Petry or whatever it might be. Not universally a failure, but, you know, nothing has tanked the Yzer plan or the rebuild. But in the micro, the short-term view this year and next or this year and last, yeah, it's been a failure. So what would you change? That's on Steve Yzerman and the Red Wings management to answer, but something has to. The way they do this has to. And I'm not saying people, I'm not saying process, but I don't know. You have to find a way to replace what you lost with Verbeek and Howe, or if it wasn't them actually, then you have to find a way to do things differently because the process right now has turned bad results. And as Brad said earlier, you're going to get to a point soon where you're going to have a lot of cap space again. But this time you can't hide behind, well, these years don't matter because your core is firmly going to be in its window and you need to supplement it with actual competitive players on good, efficient contracts.
You can hide 2, maybe 3 bad contracts at most. The pressure will be on. I don't know what the internal process is, so I can't and won't ever have a valid opinion as to what needs to change because I don't have the information to form an opinion off of. But when I look at this roster and I see 7 to 8 bad, plainly bad contracts, something has to change.
It's a simple calculation. C Nods says, not happy right now. Only silver lining is the young guns. Do you think Kane, Kasper, Berggren line is in the near future? Kopp and Compher just can't play with Kane. I think 2 to 3 times over the last 2 games, Kane passed it to the open slot and neither were anywhere near the high danger area. And that was a concern coming into the season is the compatibility and how that second line was able to do. You already saw Berggren taking Kane's spot with Kopp and Compher in the LA game. Like, you're going to see things mixed up. Whatever combination behind the top line and even somewhat before that, you're going to see those combinations come to fruition now.
I personally would like to at least see Berggren, Kasper, Kane, because it's an extreme statement. And I know we as a podcast have matured beyond just sitting here going, the young prospect is definitely better than the old vet 100 out of 100 times, understanding that skill for skill, value for value right now, Kasper is not a better hockey player than JT Compher. But it's close enough that I'm willing to experiment.
Kasper was one of the best players in the Anaheim game.
Berggren and Kane can chuck the puck around. They are both high-end puck movers. That's Berggren's strength. That's Kane's strength. The problem is both of them are negative level puck retrievers. So you are putting a lot on Kasper's plate, winning puck battles, applying pressure on the forecheck, because he has to be that guy on the line. And I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm just saying that is a lot to ask of a rookie. So it's close enough. I'm willing to try, but you have to understand there would be the possibility of that going tragically bad.
Moving on here, David Martin says, do you think Kane waives his no-trade clause to go to a contender? If the Red Wings are openly like this season's a write-off, I would not be surprised at all.
I would advocate for both sides to do that if this season is a write-off by then.
The next part of the question is, do you think it's time to send a message by waiving players like Kopp and or Petry? To clarify, Petry has a no-move clause. You can't waive him. And you've already seen the, waive, scratch, whatever key players. I'm not against it. Absolutely. If someone has a stinker, you want to call it Kopp conf or you want to call it one of the defensemen where you can do that, sure, whatever. But I think you also have to walk a line here depending on where you're at as a coach. If Lalonde's having a hard time connecting with his locker room, sometimes tough love is the answer. Sometimes it's not. And the relationship he has with the team now is going to dictate, including obviously the results, but it's going to dictate how things go forward with him with the Red Wings.
My brain works in weird ways, which is
we know.
which is a surprise to no one. And I get phrases. I fixate on phrases that I have read or seen in my past when certain things keep happening. And the more I see games like this LA game, the Ducks game, as more and more of these pile up this season, there's a Steve Dangle video from the dark years of the Leafs. It was one of his more popular videos. Can't remember what one, but the Leafs laid a huge egg and he's losing it and only a way Steve can. But one of the things he screamed at the top of his lungs is, somebody who is on the team today should not be tomorrow. And he's not talking about fringe fourth liners or depth defensemen. This team is awful. They're playing awful. They need a shakeup. Send a message. Someone who is on this team today should not be tomorrow. I'm not going to pinpoint which guy, because you could make a case for about 8 of them. But I am A-okay if they want to send some shockwaves through that room.
By and large, yes, but I will point out the key difference is that I think a lot of the times the players in Toronto were a big part of the problem where they had the wrong mix. I believe in Detroit's core, or at least I don't think the answer is to shake up Detroit's core. So just to clarify, because
what do you classify as the core?
Larkin, Raymond, Seider, Edvinsson.
Yeah, I'm not talking about those guys.
But I think Steve was talking about...
No, this is going back.
You're talking... Because you say dark days, and I think like right now.
Well, yeah. No, the darker days before actually making the playoffs somewhat routinely.
Got it.
Yeah, no, if you want to expand the core to Kopp, Comfer, Rasmussen.
No, let's not be stupid.
But one of those players is who I'm referencing. That category of player on the team.
I believed, that the Rasmussen scratch was a healthy scratch. That was the context I was working under. Helene St. James then clarified, so credit to her and for that correction. And I got that wrong initially, but he was an upper body injury. But that's what I thought was happening with Rasmussen. So,
which would have been great. Because, if you waive a Berggren, Holl, is anybody on this team going to care? Like, oh yeah, that's just business as usual. But if all of a sudden a Kopp, a Comfer, again, if it was a healthy Rasmussen, a Sherratt, if they're out of the lineup, players will notice. Yeah. Now, whether or not the way they've been responding this year, I have skepticism it would do anything, but it might.
Hot Mess Jess says, what needs to be done to turn our PK around, and is it possible? It is. I'm not going to sit here and say, coaching in the NHL is easy and it's easy to play hockey real good. Like, that's just not the case. And this isn't a matter of, put us in and we'll do it the right way. But you can be a good PK in the NHL, even if you are not a fantastic team. There are a lot of attributes about the penalty kill that don't rely on having the best players on the ice. The NHL is trending more and more into a direction, and they might already be there. I think they are, where an aggressive penalty kill is the penalty kill to move forward with. It is risky. Yes, because you can get burned and you can be out of position. And when you're a team that struggles to be in position like the Red Wings, that risk is bigger. But I always point to Florida, but they're not the only team that does it. Look at the penalty kills that aggressively put pressure on the puck carrier, on the team on the power play. It forces mistakes. It forces them to not be able to set up. And for teams that are average or below average, it is a successful way of operating a penalty kill. I think there's nothing to lose for Detroit to go in that direction.
Yes, if you want to get more technical about it, I have been planning on doing a deep dive on this. I haven't had the time, but just from the casual observations while watching a game, it looks like the Red Wings mostly run out of a base reverse T for their PK, which is a good penalty kill setup in the sense that it really limits net front and slot options because there's always someone there, but it takes away the pressure because you're pooling your guys towards the middle of the ice. Now, the issue I'm sensing the Red Wings have in that spot is they don't have the speed to recover when they do go out of base, which then leaves some key areas vulnerable. But also they're not quick enough when they do go out of it to actually apply any pressure. So I get the strength in running that PK, but it ain't working. Whatever the hell system they are trying to run, try something else because it's not working.
Bill Gallagher says, when we look back at Yzerman's tenure, are we going to say the decisions made in the 2022 offseason proved too disastrous to ever overcome? This is where I call back to what we said a few points in this episode, which is this isn't a referendum on the rebuild as a whole. We can have, poor opinions on decisions made in certain free agent classes and pro scouting, but if this turns around in that specific context of pro scouting and the players you bring in free agency and trade, it doesn't matter. Like, these contracts all run out before the Red Wings are truly competitive. It's a big if. You still have to replace them with players who can be competitive and, not just good depth, but good players in a competitive playoff or cup run. Yeah, and that's a tall task. It's a big fat if, capital I, capital F. But the players from that class that you're talking about, no, they're not, like, just by contract structure, it's not too much to overcome. You just can't keep screwing up that way. Next one here from Michael Edlund said, we realized Simon was good, but I didn't realize what a linchpin he was and that he had turned into it that quickly. Had you? Simon Edvinsson is very good, and he had turned into it that quickly to a degree, yes. And we actually said that is a possible outcome based on what we had seen from Edvinsson in his NHL games and development to this point. So not a complete surprise. Despite how fantastic he's been, that's still amplified by the fact that most of the other defensemen around him that aren't named Moritz Seider suck.
Yeah, Ryan's right, and that's the answer. So, did we realize already that he was a linchpin? Short answer, yes. My longer answer, yes.
This season, the same way I said, if the power play was bad this season, imagine how bad the Red Wings would be. Imagine Simon Edvinsson wasn't good this season.
Oh. Well, we saw it. So we saw what it's like without him on Saturday night. It was bad. It was real bad.
Predictably bad. Tom Stevenson says, if Edvinsson is out for any significant amount of time, do we need to look at making a trade to stop the bleeding? If the Red Wings want to win, yes, as long as it can be justified in the future. If you are
That's the thing.
Like, you don't mortgage futures to just win only the season and then you lose a player, or they're going to, they're already 32 and they're not, no, you don't do that unless you pay very little, of course. But if you can make a deal that makes sense for the future, then yeah, absolutely. Because then you're giving yourself, even when Edvinsson comes back, then that makes things easier for you.
The Red Wings are not in a position to do anything with only short-term gains in mind.
Okay. I think that's quite enough for this episode. I am hoping and praying that the Red Wings do so well against San Jose that this is one of those episodes where we're messaging in our group chat laughing because of how stupid that episode now sounds for those who hadn't listened yet. I would love nothing more, because it does feel like that, inflection, that pivotal point. As much as it's one game out of 82, it really does feel like you can't walk away with a bad performance against San Jose. So we'll see.
To make a comparison, the Oilers were in a similar spot last year when they had that game going into San Jose where everybody was like, it can't possibly get worse. The Sharks are the worst team in hockey.
Oh, God.
Surely this is the game they're going to turn it around. Edmonton lost that game and then made Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final. So
the Red Wings hired Jay Woodcroft.
Now you're cooking with fire.
We're doing our best, folks. Apologies that this is such a weird year. Oh, I would love some consistency. Anyways, thank you all so very much for tuning in. We've gotten a lot of messages from people that have said things like, this has to be tough to do this kind of content in a weird time like this, and we appreciate it and that kind of thing. I got to tell you, like, as much as, sometimes it's a grind and a slog, and you'll see us all make, grumpy, tired faces. Brad more than any of us because he's a father, but still, we love doing this because of the support we get. So we really, really appreciate all those messages. And, just because things are tough doesn't mean we're going to stop recording or slow down or anything like that. No, we do hope for better times. Like last season was a lot of fun. Let's do more of that. But still, another quick note here for the Jamie Daniels Foundation, and in support of them, Hot Stove Stories Rounding the Bases with Mike Tirico and guests is on Tuesday, January 14th. Tickets are, I believe, more than halfway sold. So go to jamiedanielsfoundation.org to get your tickets. It's a breakfast event on January 14th. It's going to feature not just Mike Tirico, Jason Benetti from the Detroit Tigers, Dan Dickerson also from the Tigers, Len Casper. It's going to be a really great time. The insights, the stories, the kind of conversation that you see there, you're not going to be able to find that thing anywhere else. So again, jamiedanielsfoundation.org to get your tickets. Folks, thank you all so much for tuning in. If you're a new listener, welcome to the show. And if you're a listener of old, thank you. If you want to support the show, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. And if you want to support the show, but Patreon's not for you, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Leave a rating, the thumbs up, the stars, whatever it is. It really does help. Tell a friend about the show. To all of our patrons, we could not do this show without you. And to the sponsors of the Winged Wheel Podcast, thank you. To our name level supporters on Patreon, you are our heroes. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Arjun Shankar, Yves Bartels on behalf of the Sarah Grand Foundation, Aikfer, Samuel Soderholm, Icon, Alexander Hansen, Ghost of OSBP, Glenn Brabham, Croner's Left Knee, Ashley Whitehead, Sea Lion, Matthew M. Rice, Adam Rose, Adam Zawiza, Admiral Matt S., the Cheesebag Navy, Asher Killian, Beer League Legend, Best James Bond, Carl Brutinananaluski, Carl Provy, Citizen High Five, Clip Clop Nene, Connor Scovey, Craig Kibble, David Martin, brand new name level supporter. Welcome, David. Denny's Gamer Girl, Derek Enstam, Cider, Dickens, formerly Marlon Winchester, DJ Denton, Eric Hill, Gin and Juice, Give Blood Fight Probert, Goose Looney's Drinking Club, Griffin, God Creatives, Hockeytown Love, Hockeytown Matt, Hassam Al-Qassem, Jay Gollum, Jacob Turner, Jeff Pridemore, John Ingalls, Jonathan Miller, Kaylin Wood, Marcus, Matt Keeler, Matt McKay, Marty, Michael Edlund, Mr. Kuzi, R.A., Riley Enright, Roses Are Red, Violets Are Blue, Pickleball is Dumb, and Golf Sucks Too. Roy, Donk, Ryan Britt, Scott Martin, Skeletor, Stephen Orderleb, That's What I Appreciate About You, Wallman's Elite Dancing D, Iser Plan Stan, Aaron Hudson, General Andy Bohan of the Cheesebag Army, Sam Bankson, AA Ron, AB, All Motor No Hands, Ann Stanislavski, Antonio Gracias, Axel Sandy Pelica, Bellingham Acid Balls, Bex, Chimkim Nutgits, Commander Ben Baron of the Cheesebag Space Force, Connor Layton, Corey Prida, Darren Fick, Datsukes Dingleberries, Deep in Cider, Dylan Larkin, Trade Sacrifice, Eric Nance, Frank Stanley, Gene Sullivan, Grepsky, Griffey Boy, James Pridemore, Jeremiah Dobo, Jim, JM Rhapsody, Joey Jojo Shabadoo, Josh Yelchin, Chaotic Monkey, Keenan O'Donohue, Casper the Unfriendly Ghost, Kevin McCracken, Quaz, Larkin's Loyal Lemming, Les Grossman's Ungodly Firestorm, Linda Hull, Lucas Raymond, Ophelia, As Good As It Gets, Ryan M, Steven, That Other Guy, The Hodag, The Old Evan and Ryan, Stroke a Hole, The Hat 123, Trent Thorough, Wings fan in St. Louis, Scott, and your second favorite patron. Thank you all so very much. We'll see what happens. Talk to you Wednesday.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to visit wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you'll find links to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find ways to support the show, like Patreon, official podcast merchandise, and more. And don't forget to follow us on X at Winged Wheel Pod, at Ryan Hanna, WWP, at Brad Crisco, and at Hockeytown Evan, as well as Winged Wheel Podcast on Instagram.